In this episode, we reviewed The Misfits from 1961. This was directed by John Huston. It was written by Arthur Miller, and it starred Marilyn Monroe, Montgomery Clift, Clark Gable, Eli Wallach, and Thelma Ritter. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast exploring storytelling on film, as well as interviews with industry professionals who work in film, television, theater, among other areas of the arts. I want to welcome back to the show writer Duke Haney, who is the author of Subversia, Banned for Life, and Death Valley Superstars, which includes an essay on one of the film stars today, Marilyn Monroe. Duke, welcome back. It's been a little while.
It has been a little while. Thank you for having me back.
I
wanted to say, I was just showing this to you before you hit play. This is my, apropos, the film. This is my Misfits coffee mug. However, this is the band Misfits, which was named for the film by Glenn Danzig, who's was the front man of the band. And this is their very famous logo. You've seen this, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Crimson Ghost. I think that the logo is far more famous than the band. I see the logo on bumper stickers, and I sometimes think, do they even know like where that comes from?
Yeah, where that comes from. Well, it's such a great name for both a film and a band, the Misfits, which is, perfect to describe the bunch in this film. But before we jump into the film, because as I mentioned, one of the essays, and again, if anyone hasn't read the book Death Valley Superstars by Duke, I highly recommend it. And one of the essays is on Marilyn. I was curious, why did Marilyn appeal to you as a subject matter to write about in the book?
I've always liked her. I think she's probably my favorite actress, or female actor, to be more perhaps in the spirit of the times. I just think that she there's just something fascinating about her, and I know that she obviously didn't have a terrific range. In fact, I was thinking recently that for a long period in her career, she really only played women on the edges of show business, or if not in the center of show business. She played an aspiring actress, for example, in The 7-Year Itch. She played chanteuses a number of times in Bus Stop, Some Like It Hot, and River of No Return. She played showgirls in The Prince and the Showgirl.
That's right.
And also in There's No Business Like Show Business, probably one of her least known films. So it's interesting that some of those roles she elected to play, but others were assigned to her. It was as if these people at 20th Century Fox couldn't imagine a creature like Marilyn Monroe existing outside of show business. But I know that she, again, didn't have the range of someone like Meryl Streep, but I kind of take her more seriously than I do Streep. I said that to a friend of mine once, who's kind of a contrarian like me, and he said, hell, I take Jane Mansfield more seriously than I do Meryl Streep.
Well, the thing with Marilyn, I heard another film scholar say, like, she always acted with her heart. I mean, and you even pointed out, even taking a photo, how much she just gave to a still. And as you and I talking on email lately, I've been on a bit of a Marilyn kick, and so I've seen a lot of these before, and it's true. Like, she just, if it's her, as you said in the book, if it's her and someone else on the screen, you're always watching her, and not just because of her beauty, just there's something that she just pours she pours out so much light and so much of her soul. And if she's not on the screen, you're like, where'd she go?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
George Cukor, who very unhappily directed her in the film that was ultimately called Let's Make Love. It's one of her least.
I still have to see that. I haven't with
That's
Yves
still
Montand,
another
right?
film, by the way, in which she plays a showgirl.
Right.
Still another one. And then he was doing her last film, the one that was never completed. Someone's got to give a prescient title. He said about her something to the effect of, doing a scene, she had to run, and boy, she ran. You had to like call her back, Marilyn, come back. He just said boom, she went for it. And you see, there are comments to that effect about the character played by Marilyn in the Misfits. There's a scene, for example, where she's eating breakfast with Clark Gable, and he says, "Boy, you go all out, don't you?"
Oh, right. Yeah.
Down the eggs, and
he's like, you don't just pick at it. You just
like
he's like, you really
do, he says.
Yeah, you really wolf it down. I think I correct you probably, I mean, you know a lot more about her than I do, but I seem to remember Sinatra's mother once saying to Sinatra, like, she's sure, you should marry her because she could sure eat, of course, Italian mother, right? Like, that's what
right.
she,
Perfect.
That's what was popped out the most. But this film, I've seen it a couple of times, and I've always really, really liked it. And I noticed a little while ago it was a favorite of yours on Letterboxd, on your Letterboxd profile. So what makes it a favorite to you? Why is this so high rate? Why do you rate this one so high?
Well, the first time I saw it, I was around 18 or 19. I was a student actor in New York, and I went to the Bleecker Street Cinema, Revival House on where else Bleecker Street. I was with I think 2 other people in my acting class, and I didn't like it at all. I found it talky. I couldn't really follow it. It is talky. I don't think I don't think the film is really truly a success. I think it's more an interesting failure than a true masterpiece. But it was later, while I was preparing to write about Marilyn Monroe for the book, that I was reviewing her films, and I watched that one, and it really spoke to me as an adult in of decrepit age, in a way that it didn't to me at 18 or 19. I think it's a very adult movie.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You have to have lived a little,
Mhm.
I think, to really to appreciate it. And it just it has an aura of sadness about it. Almost from the beginning of the film, actually from the beginning of the film, because it has that marvelous credit sequence with the
the puzzle
of the
pieces.
jigsaw puzzle. I even looked up, I made a point of noting I was like, my God, that's so great. Because a lot of films at that time had that.
Yeah, I wondered if it was Sal Bass, but I don't think it was.
It's not. It was George Nelson and Company, Inc.
Okay.
Apparently, Huston had in mind a different type of credit sequence originally, with actual footage, and then he decided to go with this sort of semi-animated. But it has that haunting theme by Alex North that's playing over the credits, and I don't know. It's a film like no other. There's no other film quite like this.
Yeah, it's true. Everything with the horse, like, I've never seen a sequence at the end with the horse like that in anything. I'm not surprised that Gable read it and didn't understand it, because she thought it was like a Western.
Yeah.
It's like and that documentary you sent me, I like it, Arthur Miller was like, it's an Eastern Western, and I was like,
yeah.
This is the furthest thing from a Western that you can get, other than the fact that they're cowboys. But that is, you said something interesting, that it's like rather than a masterpiece, it's an interesting failure. I mean, why do you see it that way?
I think that was how many of the people associated um, with the film saw it. I seem to remember, I haven't, it's been a long time since I've read the Montgomery Clift biographies,
Is that
but
the Bosworth one, the Patricia
well, that's
Bosworth?
one,
That's the
and
biggest one, I think, the
right,
most well
that
known
was the
one.
one. Yeah, I had an exchange with her once. I was actually, okay, this is, I'm gonna, it's gonna sound kind of name droppy and kind of boastful, so I apologize in advance.
Go ahead.
I wrote about Monty for a previous book, and his nephew had read what I'd written, and he got in touch with me, and he interviewed
Oh,
me for a documentary about Monty.
oh, really?
But I ended up being cut from it. Thank God I was cut from it, because I was really overweight, and
Oh,
I'm sure I said nothing of value. But I had actually met the nephew when he was about 5 years old. I just showed up at Monty's brother's house in
right.
DC. And he
Yeah,
was
I
there.
remember you mentioned
Yeah.
that when we initially met. Yeah.
And that's what he I think he had some memory of my showing up. I can't remember now if he did or didn't, but anyway, he liked what I had written, and he felt that I had written about his father with a lot of tact. And I don't think he probably agreed with my take on Monty, because this film presents a very different portrait of Monty. And I was just, recycling the usual crap, the longest suicide in Hollywood history, and so on. But
Wait,
that
Clift had a son? I didn't realize Clift had a.
no,
Or,
no,
oh, this is
Brooks,
his
his
nephew.
brother,
Sorry, I'm
Monty's
sorry. I got
nephew.
that mixed
That,
up. Okay.
that's all right.
Yeah.
No, no. Brooks Clift. I showed up at the home of Brooks
Right.
Clift,
Right. His brother.
and
Right.
and right, Robert, his son, was there, and he was about, I think, 5 years old at the time. I just remember
Okay.
these three tow-headed boys standing on the lawn, and I was like, "Is this where Brooks Clift lives?" And they're like, "Yeah, come here, come on." And open the door, "Dad." And then he took me upstairs to. I said this in my first interview with you. He took me upstairs and showed me like all of Monty's stuff,
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
remember you
we
mentioned
talked
that.
about him for a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah.
But in I think it's in the Patricia Bosworth bio, which Robert Clift has some problems with. He confronts her about that
Oh.
in his documentary. But I think that the last word ever heard by Monty Clift, he was living with a man who was purported in the Bosworth book to be his servant, and in fact was his lover. And that was one of Robert's
Yeah.
problems with it. And he shot it to Monty in the bedroom. "Hey, the Misfits is showing on TV tonight. You want to watch it?" And Monty shot it back, "No." And that
I
was
know. I just
the
read that the
last
other night.
word. So I think that the script never really coheres. It's a sort of a languid film, and there's sort of two parts of it. There's it could be said that the first hour and a half of the film is sort of a prelude to the Mustang sequence. It's all kind of building up to that.
Yeah.
And then you notice that when that sequence begins, there's less dialogue. I think it's in that sequence where you really see Houston's direction really comes to
Yeah.
life the most there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Photography just is on a whole other level there. You get the most
Certainly.
striking shots, and I somehow think that it's as if that there are these two films that are kind of assembled. I mean, I love the the first part of the film, the part that deals, with the Monroe character Roslyn meeting these three men, and her developing relationships with them. I mean, I love all that. I mean, I love the film. but it just sort of feels like it's there's the bridge from that part of the film to the Mustang sequences. It's a little wobbly somehow, and
Mhm.
I think that one of the characters, Guido, played by Eli Wallach, I think there may be some real mistakes in the writing there. According to Barbara Leeming, one of Marilyn's biographers, um, um, she thinks that the character Guido, played by Eli Wallach, is based on Elia Kazan.
Ah, oh, that's interesting.
Um, and that gets into a whole thing. It might be interesting to kind of go into this a little bit about the history of Marilyn Monroe and
So,
Arthur Miller.
so I wonder if Gay is maybe a little like Miller, because they were
Yes,
always
she says
who
that
Gable plays.
that's exactly right. Barbara Leeming says that Miller, made no, uh, uh, he didn't hesitate to say that, he identified with the gay character,
Yeah,
Gaylord, I should say. It's
right.
unusual, would be unusual in this day and age
Of course, yeah,
for a
to
man
hear
to have
that
the name Gay, I think. But
as a
his name is
first name.
Gaylord, right?
It certainly, I don't know if it would have, how obvious it would have been to audiences then, but now everything we know, it's quite obvious how much this part was tailored for for her personality. I mean, everything from, her being totally objectified, that people can't see her, that she feel the how sensitive she was, how vulnerable she was, how emotional she could get, um how damaged she was. I mean, I think she read it, and I believe she even got, she that was part of the big conflict between them, was she was like, what the hell is this? This script is clearly about me. And I think she hated it too. I think she didn't like the
She did.
film.
She
Right.
did. There's a funny story that I was just noted. In fact, I have it right here in the Barbara Leeming book. And
Oh,
it, it's it's so hilarious. I mean, I should actually just read it out loud. I mean, it's hilarious to me.
yeah,
But
go ahead.
well, all right. Well, then I'm going to have to put on my my old man apparatus here. Okay, so uh, Miller. I get those. I transpose those names a lot because Mailer wrote a
Oh, right.
biography
His
of
bio on her.
Marilyn.
Yeah.
So Miller had a good friend named Norman Roston, who was a poet, and Marilyn became very friendly with Norman Roston and his wife Hedda. Roston later wrote a book about her. He and Miller had a falling out about Marilyn years later.
Oh,
But there was nothing romantic, I believe, in her relationship with Norman Roston. But anyway, Marilyn never liked the script. But anyway, so okay, so I'll just read this. She complained to Norman Roston that the character Arthur wanted her to portray was passive. She was right, of course. But Mailer had put Roston in a most awkward position, or Marilyn, I'm sorry, had put Roston in a most awkward position. He was one of Miller's oldest and closest friends. At the very least, he could not be expected to take sides, Arthur having failed to show him the script. And so basically, he went away and Marilyn sent him the script. A week later, the phone rang. Marilyn was calling. She announced that Miller was listening on the other phone. She asked Rosson what he thought of the script. He was on the spot. He said he believed it would make a good picture. Marilyn told him to turn to a key speech, which she characterized as lousy. The speech is too goddamn long, she declared. And anyway, it isn't right. Then she paused, expecting Ross to concur. He didn't say anything. I want the speech rewritten, she barked. When her husband remained silent, Marilyn said, Arthur, are you there? I'm here, he said in a gravelly voice. Well, what are you going to do about it? I'm going to think about it. Norman agrees with me. I don't agree, Marilyn, Rawson interjected. I agreed to read the screenplay, which I did. If Arthur asked my opinion on certain scenes or speeches, I'll tell him, look, it's a draft. I mean, it's not final, is it? It's a draft, said Miller. And then Rawson said, maybe that section can be trimmed. If Marilyn has specific objections, I object to the whole stupid speech, she said, and he's going to rewrite it.
Oh my God.
I've read
Do you
that
know what
so
speech she's
horribly.
talking to specifically?
I
What
don't know,
speech?
but it's a very speechy script
Yeah. So it's hard to kind of to pin down which one it was. What you know, with that being said, we, you know, that you're right. I mean, it's, you know, Miller being a playwright, it is heavy on dialogue. What do you see this being about? I mean, what is the essence of it, do you think?
it's about freedom. It's about a dream of freedom, and I think finally about you know, the impossibility of freedom or the cost of freedom. These people are all seeking freedom or have sought it. You have Marilyn has come to, excuse me, Roslyn has come to Reno to get a divorce, called to get a divorce.
Yeah, that because at the beginning, like Thelma Ritter is telling her to say that she got hit because because Marilyn was just going to say, well, I'll just say that the guy was. She says something along the lines of he's not emotionally available. She was like, well, they're not going to give it to you. And I thought, and then it dawned on me, oh yeah, you couldn't just go. You have to like make a case for it.
Yeah, well, that's scene at the beginning is really pretty interesting for a number of reasons. You have Eli Wallach at that point. His character Guido is working for a garage, and he's come
Right.
to the house. Apparently, he's been called by the Thelma Ritter character Isabel because Roslyn wants to sell her car. The car is dented up,
Right.
and there's only 23 miles in the car. Um, Guido is told, yet it's already dented up. And Isabel says men keep running into the car to start a conversation with Roslyn. Well, that actually happened to Marilyn Monroe. She didn't
Oh
like to
God.
drive because people used to run into her on
Oh
purpose
wow.
to start a
Oh wow.
conversation with her, to meet her, to say, I ran into Marilyn Monroe.
I could see that.
So that's taken from
Right.
Marilyn's life. There's a curious thing, there's a recurring theme in the film of time. And Isabel walks out of the boarding house where she lives. She evidently came to Reno to get a divorce herself, and stayed, which was often the case. I'm going to come back to the divorce thing in just one second, but and then Roslyn is upstairs, and we sort of first see her through the sort of filmy curtain upstairs in this boarding house. She has come to Reno to, you know, as I said, to get a divorce. In those days, if you lived in the state of Nevada for 6 weeks, you were considered a resident, and you could get a no-fault divorce, which was very difficult to obtain in all other states. Marilyn herself had divorced her first husband in around 1948 by moving temporarily to Las Vegas and qualifying for Nevada, you know, as a Nevada resident in order to divorce her first husband, who later became a cop with the LAPD. He was a merchant seaman at the time that for most of their marriage. He worked in a factory first, and then he became a merchant seaman. And Miller had the whole way that this movie began was Miller went to Reno to qualify as a resident and divorce his first wife so that he could marry Marilyn. And he stayed in fact, I think that the ranch where he stayed, I think it's even in the film. And he met these cowboys on the ranch, and he was just as a New Yorker, this whole setup was just really fascinating to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he
And
wanted
they're all
to,
based on people he met. like that he
Yes,
knew all,
right.
which is it's just which is pretty remarkable that this outsider came and wrote this story based on all these, these quote unquote misfits. But I found that the characters, particularly Gable's character, Gay, to be, because he's like this ordinary, he's an ordinary guy. He's a cowboy, but he is sort of can't quite fit into society, which is interesting. Like he can't, they all talk about how that anything's better than working wages, that obviously whatever they're making at a job is crap. And so he's as you said, freedom, he's living his life on his own terms, and that's what everybody wants. I also felt this element of feeling for one another was a big part of it. I mean, the whole thing with the horses at the end was how upset Roslyn was getting that they're going to kill these horses, and then they Gable and Clift decide to let the horses go, because she just can't stand this element of people not listening, not feeling for one another, not communicating. You see how upset she gets when Clift was falling off the horse at the rodeo in the bowl. It's there's a lot of truth to that, how we all just kind of passively go through life and don't really feel for people in our environment. I mean, do you see that as also a major part of the film in terms of what it was about?
What exactly?
Just the big element of people not being able to communicate very well, not being able to feel for each other. I saw that as a
Yes. I
big
think the
part
lack
of
of
the film.
communication. Sure, they're all alienated.
Yeah,
But I mean, you can look at the alienation in two ways. You could say that these people have all, in a sense, chosen their alienation.
that's true.
Maybe she hasn't. In fact, she seems to have left her husband because she felt alienated from him. She says he wasn't there, is the way she
Right.
puts it.
Yeah.
And
He's there, but he's not there.
she does seem to want to connect, but I think too, it could be argued that American culture had become increasingly alienating during that period in the 1950s. There's a lot about, I mean, in a sense, these cowboys. There were a lot of books at one point published about cowboys. In one period, they were referred to again and again as a vanishing breed, and you just kept seeing that phrase again and again. And these guys are vanishing breed, but so are the Mustang. It's pointed
Right.
out later in the film. Gable says, he said, it never occurred to me before, but it looks a lot worse when you're killing a few as
When
opposed
it's
to
just
killing many.
yeah, right.
It's
Which
because
also connects to Guido dropping the bombs during the war. Like he doesn't have to look at anyone in the eye; he just drops a bomb, and it doesn't feel as real.
He feels terribly guilt. Well, he claims to feel terrible guilt about all that. But to go back to that first scene, the one where Thelma Ritter comes out of the house, she has a clock, and she says her clock isn't working, and this is the thing that you see throughout the film. There's a lot of talk about time, and I think in a way these people are sort of trying to live outside of time.
Yeah.
And that's a part of freedom. But then upstairs, Marilyn is preparing for court, and this is like straight Marilyn Monroe. I mean, it couldn't be any more Marilyn Monroe. She is putting on her makeup.
You can't remember what the lines
in the mirror. First of all, she's late. She was always late. So she's about to be late. She's putting on her makeup. She was an expert. I mean, she practically did not need a makeup person. She was so good at doing it, but she did have one, Whitey Snyder, who did her makeup. But they collaborated. I think they kind of together worked out the Marilyn Monroe makeup formula. And this is, after years of experimentation on her part. Her first drama coach, Natasha Lightess. Marilyn lived with Natasha, and Natasha. It's very funny. I saw an interview with her, and she was talking about Marilyn getting up very late in the morning, and she said, and then she sits at her vanity, and then begins the surgery. And what she meant was
Oh
Marilyn
my
putting
God.
on all this, putting on makeup, and supposedly she would put on a whole face and then take it off. I mean, this is when she was about to go out onto a
Oh
sound
wow.
stage or to go anywhere. She would put on her makeup and then take it all off with cold cream and put it back on again. And it had to be perfect. She was a perfectionist, which is one of
Right.
her problems. So she's putting on makeup, and she has her. It's so funny. In the film, her court appearance is being treated like a play.
Yeah.
She has
Yeah.
lines, and she's
Yeah.
trying to memorize her lines, and she had
Yeah.
a terrible problem memorizing lines.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so then Thelma Ritter, Isabel, is like her acting coach. She
Yeah.
comes in and Marilyn had these acting coaches. She had two who
Hmm.
were both women. They were like surrogate mothers to her. In fact, Natasha thought of Marilyn as a kind of daughter. And I think Paul Strasberg did too. Marilyn sort of replaced Natasha with Paula. But so Thelma Ritter comes into the room, Isabel, and she starts running lines with Marilyn, Um, and
Yeah.
then this
Yeah.
too is kind of, I think, pretty Marilyn Monroe. If at some point she kind of rejects the line, and that's where she gets into this thing that you mentioned earlier about uh, uh, I forgot what it was now.
Well,
So
I also read that what she was going to say to the judge is exactly what I mean. I don't know if this is true, but Miller lifted what she said when she divorced DiMaggio. I don't know. Do you know if that's true or not? I don't know if you ever read that.
I didn't read that specifically,
Okay.
but it
Okay.
is said that DiMaggio beat her up in her hotel room. It's said. I
Okay.
don't know if
Yeah.
it's true or not, but he beat her up after
They showed that in the
watching her.
film Blonde recently. I don't know if you saw that. I didn't like
No,
it, but
I don't want to see that.
yeah,
I've seen
they
enough of
show
these
it and it's brutal. And I was
I've
like,
seen
oh,
enough
I don't know about this.
documentations. Right. Yeah. I heard that it showed that, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it is said that he did that.
Oh, okay.
Um,
I didn't know that. I never knew that.
um, you know, I mean, nobody was there except the two of them. So
Right, right.
I mean, who knows what really went on? Um, Not to say that she wasn't exploited and abused and so on, but she was known to exaggerate um, uh,
Mm, mm.
difficulties of her life. For example, early in her career, she told newspaper writers that she was an orphan, and that led to a kind of minor scandal in which her mother was found in a sanatorium,
Yeah,
institutionalized. I think in a
yeah.
way her mother sort of has a cameo. I don't mean her true mother, but there's a bit in the film where Marilyn is it's at the paddleball scene where there people are wagering on
Oh,
her
yeah, yeah.
in the bar while she's playing paddleball, and there's a church lady
Oh,
played by
yeah,
Estelle Winwood, and
yeah.
I think that that's basically Marilyn's mother, kind of
So,
come to pay a visit.
right.
I think Miller kind of introduced Marilyn's mother into that scene. And you
I,
notice that she has a kind of weird hypnotic power over Marilyn. She
yeah,
says something like, I know you and I love you for your life of sin and pain. I
right.
understand you like no one else. And Marilyn starts taking all these I guess what are they?
Change.
Gold tokens. It's
Yeah,
these tokens,
right.
and she starts just putting them giving them to the Estelle Winwood church lady character, and
Hmm. Hmm.
she's saying basically, for her mission. And Marilyn's mother had was kind of a religious nut,
Oh
Um,
wow. I was
she did a
wondering what
religious.
that was about. I was like, what is this woman coming in there with this tin can? So that makes sense. That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah, I think that's a visit from Marilyn's
Oh
mother in the
wow.
film, and Marilyn sought these sort of surrogate. She basically integrated herself into families.
Yeah. Yeah.
She did that with the Strasberg family. She did that with Milton Green and his family. She
Hmm.
did that with her last psychiatrist, Ralph Greenson. She became part of that. Was also part of his strategy in trying to, cure her or whatever.
Right. Right.
He felt it would help her to do that, but she did. She had a pattern of doing that. Her acting coaches, as I say, were surrogate mother figures.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and you know,
definitely.
Gable was a father figure to her.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah. Well, the character is sort of like that. I mean, it's interesting that there's this romance happens between them in the film, but he's almost more fatherly towards her. I mean, which you see, it's not uncommon that women will be with someone much older because they lacked a father in their own life, and I thought that element was interesting of the gay, because he is sort of, as I was saying, order, like he earlier, he is an ordinary guy, and he's not particularly educated, but he is wise in certain
mhm,
ways. Like when he says to her, you got to take the good with the bad, and that
mhm,
things inevitably change. Like you
mhm,
can't, as he says about his first divorce when they're having breakfast, which he's like, I thought I'd be married and I'd get married and that would be it forever. And then he realized, well, nothing's forever. But he seems, from my impression was that he seems to have accepts a lot of these things about life, whereas she cannot accept that things change. She cannot accept that someone could be so nice and then they're mean. She just can't accept that people have different sides to their personality. So I think as much as she taught him to feel for others, he was giving her some wisdom in terms of accepting people's flaws. Because she could, when she finds out that they're gonna go kill these horses, she cannot. She just, it was almost like she didn't want to talk to him ever again. And he said, "Well, can't you take the good with the bad?" And she says no. But then he gets her to not to accept that he's gonna do this, because she doesn't. But he does, I think, get her to think about that. I mean, she does sort of try to to have an open mind to some things that he was saying. And I think in the sort of interesting way he would put it, like he compares what she does as a strip, like as a what I mean, it's, they never say that she was a stripper, but it's pretty
yeah,
obvious,
yeah.
when he's like, well, look, I mean, you started off thinking something was good, that people are going to see you dance, and then it turns into something bad because they're watching you, they're basically ogling you. He's like, well, he's like, I don't judge you for that, I tip my hat off because I know the difference. And then she was so touched that he again, this element of seeing one another, she was so touched that he could see through that everyone was just seeing the body, and he's seeing something more, he's able to see her. And I was really fascinated by that, because it seems as if Guido is the one who can see her, and then you realize that he's actually totally full of shit. He's just trying to tell her what he wants to hear.
Well, I don't know. I don't entirely agree with your interpretation here. I don't think that Gable is able to accept change, the gay character, up until the very end of the film. I think he's desperately trying to hang on to his freedom. He is
Oh,
resisting.
that for sure, yeah. But just in
He's
terms of
resisting.
relationships and things ending, he seemed to be a more accepting about those things.
Well, he's he's a want what's the word, a drifter,
Yeah,
really.
definitely.
They're all drifters.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I and the thing about him, so-called tipping his hat. I mean, what Marilyn craved more than anything, I think she craved this. Maybe love and respect were the same to her. I don't know, but she craved respect
Yeah.
in the worst way. Um, she felt she had never had it. I think she thought that she would get it by becoming a movie star, and nobody respected her then.
Right.
And so it's the respect that Gable shows her in that moment.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
turns her around momentarily. She goes along with the hunt up until she really sees how cruel it is.
Yes. Right.
And then it just becomes unbearable to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she does come around. And you see this coming. I mean, it's all unfortunately planted only in in dialogue. But there are a number of moments in the scene in the film where she expresses concern for animals.
Yeah.
She
The
talks
rabbit
about
early on,
the
and then
rabbit,
the horses later.
and that's a funny scene. You see this only a couple of times in the film because I think there was a lot of rage in Marilyn. Understandably,
Oh
given
yeah.
all that she had been through. And in fact, one of the reasons that the big reason she hated the script, according to Barbara Leeming, it wasn't that Miller had put so much of her into the character. It was rather the way that he portrayed her. He sentimentalized her you in the film, the three men, they each sort of wax poetic about the wonders of Roslyn.
Yeah. Right.
These are this is the way that Miller wanted to see her, the way I think he did see her at the beginning of the relationship. But by the time
Right.
he'd written that script, he knew otherwise. He knew that that Marilyn could be extremely difficult,
Right.
and
Right.
had a lot of anger in her, they had a lot of fights,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so Barbara Leeming refers to that side of her as the monster, and to Marilyn, the fact that he did not incorporate the monster into the character showed that he refused to acknowledge it. And if he couldn't love all of her, he didn't truly love her at all. This is the way
Oh,
that
I
she
see.
saw it.
I see. Yeah. Yeah. I
Uh,
can see that now.
but in that moment with the rabbit, there's a couple of moments in the film where you see these flashes of anger, which look very real to me.
Yeah.
Uh, at one point, in the scene with the rabbit, or about the rabbit, we never see the rabbit, but the rabbit has been uh, eating the lettuce
Yeah.
in this garden that Gable has planted. He's becoming a little more domesticated with Roslyn than he's
Yeah.
ever been, actually.
Yeah.
And
He even
they're
says that
living,
to her later. I never did this for my wife.
yeah, they're living in this unfinished house, and that gets into a whole
Yeah.
other thing. But he says something about the lettuce, and she turns her head and she says, "I don't care about the lettuce." Um, and I think that's, and she does it again. There's a couple of moments in the film where you see these flashes like that.
Yeah.
They're very
Yeah.
quick,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then of
Yeah.
course at the very end, she full on
Oh,
explodes.
that's so good. I
But
love the
she
way
was,
he shot it too,
yeah,
Houston, from afar,
yeah,
because she's so alone in that moment. Whereas I think, in a conventionally speaking, you'd want to get a close up, or like a go, or a medium, because she's moving quite a bit. So a medium shot, but it's so far out, and because she's so alone versus these three men. I thought that was it's so powerful. You don't even have to go right into her face.
oh no, it would never have worked if you had done that. That was
Yeah,
sort of the
no,
way
no,
that
no.
Miller wanted the whole film to be done. I mean, he talked a lot in that documentary and
Yeah.
elsewhere. He talked about how he saw the Nevada landscape as lunar, and he really wanted the film to emphasize that, and he was
Mm.
disappointed that Houston wasn't emphasizing that lunar landscape
Oh,
quite
that's
so
interesting.
much.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, in that scene, you really see it. It looks like they were shooting on a dry lake bed. That's where it looks like it was shot. She's a tiny little figure,
Yeah.
sort of swallowed up in the landscape. But if the camera had been close on her, um, I I I just don't think it would have worked
Yeah, no, I
to do
agree.
it like that. And curiously, here perhaps we're seeing a little bit of, the monster. And yet Marilyn was very unhappy. She was unhappy throughout, always unhappy with the script, with the film, with the filming. Um, there weren't many bright spots for her in this experience, and of course, her marriage to Miller broke down
Yeah.
during the making of it. But she didn't like that bit because she felt that Roslyn should try to reason with these men. But looking at the film again, it seems to me that she sort of does try to reason with them earlier.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
this is the last resort. This is
Yeah.
to just have a full-on tantrum, I guess.
Well, yeah,
Nothing
at
else
that
has
point they've
worked.
already tied up all these horses,
Mm,
dragged them down. I mean, what else could she do? I could see why she would totally have snapped.
mhm.
I also thought it was interesting that initially she says to him, I don't see you, I don't feel the same way about you. As he said, well, maybe I'll win you over. He did pretty quickly. It's like, that he's kissing her in the morning and she, that he's making eggs for her. I thought it was also interesting, and this is true, I think, of of men often, was that they couldn't even remember Thelma Ritter's name, and then but they always remembered her name, because she's the one they're interested in. And even the fact that they were all gonna have a drink, and then Gable's like, yeah, the wine glasses are over there, and she puts him in his place. But then yet for Roslyn, he's making breakfast, he's got the eggs going, like, because it's something that he there's something he wants from her, right? That's why he's being such a gentleman. Otherwise, he'd be like, go cook me some eggs.
Well, we never really got into, I mean, I think we should really get into the other characters in the film because
Yeah, oh, for sure.
it seems to me that the three men, we have Gay or Gaylord played by Gable, Guido played by Eli Wallach, and Perce played by Montgomery Clift. And each of them, there's a sort of role that they each seem to want Marilyn to play. Um, there is something incestuous about I think it's suggested, hinted at in the script, in the attraction between Gay and Roslyn, because Miller would have known that Marilyn had fantasies as a child that Gable was her true father.
Yeah, yeah.
Gladys,
That
her mother, had
she
apparently
kept his picture under her. She kept his picture under her pillow. Apparently, I read
Mhm.
Gable, and he even during the breakfast scene says, "Oh, you're about the same size as my daughter."
That's what I was
So
going to say. And do you know what his daughter's name is? He says it at one point in the film, Rosemary.
oh, I didn't pick up on that.
So there's a similarity in name. He even says to her, "You're the same as he just said. You're the same size as my daughter."
Yeah,
When there's a scene later in the film when we never know if he really saw his children or not. They're adult children.
yeah,
We never
yeah.
know. We never see. But
I
he
was
thinks he's
wondering
seen them.
because
He's
he's so
drunk.
drunk. I thought
Yeah.
maybe he imagined this, and he even says earlier, "Oh, I saw them once or twice." Like he doesn't want to show like the pain of all that, which is now making me question some of the other things he says about relationships ending. If he really did accept that as much, as much as he says, because obviously when he was drunk, you saw how much pain as he's calling out to his son, also named Gaylord. That's a incredible acting from Gable. I mean, that's
And no,
such
it's
great.
amazing.
Yeah,
It's maybe the best bit of acting he ever did.
I think so. Yeah, I
Um,
think he's
but
incredible in that
but
scene.
I didn't even know. I mean, watching the film again, I thought, I don't think he's ever mentioned that he had a son to Roslyn, so that when you hear him screaming Gaylord, you're like, oh, he has a son, in
Yeah,
addition to the daughter that we've heard so much about. So in a way, so Marilyn Roslyn is sort of a kind of daughter to him, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so then we come to Guido, and so he was a bombardier during World War II. He flies this plane now in Reno, and or around Reno. We learned that in addition to hunting mustang, he kills eagles. She makes a comment about that also. But I think
Right.
she gives him a pass on that because he says, well, eagles kill lambs. So I guess to Roslyn, it's like, okay, lambs better than eagles, because lambs don't kill eagles.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so now this is really curious, but he was married at one point to a woman he had known since he was 7 years old. They had
Yeah.
been effectively, so in a way, his wife was almost a kind of sister, you know,
Yeah.
to him. He was going to medical school before the war, but the war seems to have devastated him. Because one
Yes.
or two things have devastated him to the point where he dropped out of medical school. He's
Yeah.
never been
Lost his
ambitious since.
ambition, as he
Right,
says. Yeah.
right. So his wife sounds like she comes from sturdy Italian peasant stock. There's talks about her. She was helping him to build his house, and Gable says, "Oh, she was a good sport. You know, she's up there hammering nails
Yeah. He
and all
doesn't
that."
talk about her like someone that he loved like a wife. Like he's like, oh, she never complained. Like his feelings are quite, it's really interesting the way Wallach played it. Like he's very neutral about it. So I think it's interesting the way she responds. Like when he says, well, she never complained, he goes, well, maybe that's why she died, because she was,
Hmm.
she was never able to vent. And then as they're dancing, he says, oh, I haven't danced for years. And she's like, well, what about your wife? And he's like, oh, well, she wasn't very graceful. And that pisses her off, right? Like, you should have taught her. So
Well,
she's constantly putting him in his place.
I have a funny story about that. I think I read this. She had a masseuse who has a small role in the film. He was Monty's masseuse too. Ralph Roberts was his name. He plays a medic. He's only in the film for a minute. Marilyn had, a great deal of trouble sleeping, as everyone knows.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that she would fall asleep was that Ralph would come over in the middle of the night and just give her a massage. She would fall asleep while he was massaging her. And he said somewhere, he's written a book about her, but so he used to have, somebody had put up online some things he had written about the making of the Misfits, and I think they took them down because it went into this book that's called Mimosa. So this is all from memory, but when they were shooting that scene with the dancing, Marilyn said that Eli Wallach kept trying to turn her away from the camera. He kept trying to hog the camera. So he kept spinning her so he was facing the camera and her back was to the camera. It really irked her. She was really annoyed about it. But she said to Ralph Roberts, she said, doesn't he realize that when he does that, everyone in the audience is going to be looking at my ass and not at his face?
So it's not going to work, Eli.
But supposedly they didn't exactly fall out, but they didn't have a particularly cordial relationship after that.
Well, she wanted to cut some things with him, right? Which is which is interesting because she got him the part. She wanted him to play the part. And
yeah,
then she wanted to cut some stuff.
They'd known each other for a long time.
Right.
And but no, the scene he takes her, after she gets her divorce, she goes to court, gets her divorce. She runs into Guido and Gay in a bar. And interestingly, even though Guido clearly has an interest in her, it's kind of weird. This is what I meant about, I think his character needed some revision. He introduces Roslyn to this man who to Gay, who has a way with the ladies. We see that right away. Gay is one of those people, and there were guys like Reno like this. They hung around Reno because all these women came to Reno to get divorced, and they went wild. There was an expression for it, Reno wild. So they wanted to have flings, and that seems to be sort of Gay's. That's what passes
Well,
for romantic life.
you see that with the woman off the
Right.
top that he's saying goodbye to. It's like he's a drifter. He's going from woman to woman and doing all various kinds of ways to make money in order to live. And
Right.
I also like that when they met, it's also his dog that got her attention.
Yeah.
And then we see later the horses, the rabbits.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No,
it's
that's
ironic.
right. And this woman on the train, he's putting, when we first see Gay, he's putting this woman on the train, and she's clearly smitten. She's blowing kisses to
Yeah.
him as the train
Yeah.
blows away. And she says, "Come to St. Louis." She
Yeah.
clearly has money, right? She has a little bit of
Definitely.
money.
Yeah.
And but he's not going to consider this. So Guido
Yeah.
weirdly introduces Roslyn to Gay, who clearly has a way with the ladies. But in reality, that's what happened with Eli Kazan and Arthur Miller. They met
Right.
Marilyn at the same time. She took up with Eli Kazan,
Mhm, mhm.
and then later Kazan passed her on to Arthur Miller,
Yeah.
and which is weird. Although she was smitten with Arthur Miller, but continued to sleep with Eli Kazan.
Yeah.
It's all quite weird. But so Guido takes them out to this unfinished house. He was working on the house at the time his wife died. His wife died. Somehow it was connected apparently to her pregnancy, and it was really his negligence that led to her
Yeah.
death.
Didn't have a spare tire
He got a
to
flat
drive her
tire
to the
while going to go
hospital.
get right,
Right.
and
Right.
so and
Which also really bothers her. Like she mentions
yeah,
it. She
yeah,
mentions it a number of times. It's interesting because I actually thought that the jealousy between the three men would be a bigger part of it,
yeah.
but that seems to come and go quite easily.
That's a problem in a
Yeah,
way.
yeah, I see what.
It's a
Yeah,
little
now,
bit unrealistic,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's really weird because he takes Guido takes Marilyn on a tour of the house, and they go into the bedroom. The
yes,
marriage, look at the marriage bed. There's a picture of Guido and his late wife on the wall. He does look a bit grief stricken in
yeah,
that
oh
moment.
yeah, yeah,
She's fantastic in that moment.
yeah,
That's one of her best moments in the film. It's just all she does is listen,
yeah.
and
She was so there. She was so
yeah,
present.
yeah, and then she's uncomfortable. The way
Mm,
she gets out of the room, even it's just fantastic.
yeah,
And then they sort of have this housewarming party. Um, Probably there was never a housewarming party, but now they're finally having this housewarming party. They're
yeah.
dancing, Thelma Ritter has a cast on. She's like actually using like a butter knife to tap to keep time on her cast.
Yeah.
She's great in the film.
She's always so great. I want someone to write a book on her because
She
it's an
deserves
interesting
a
story.
damn book. If there
Yeah,
isn't a book about her, she deserves one because she was fantastic. But
absolutely.
I gotta say, as a Virginian, I don't for a second believe that she was a Virginian.
Oh, right,
Uh,
because she mentions that she's from, yeah,
yeah. She
Virginia.
basically says that she left Virginia because it was mandatory in Virginia for girls to be beautiful.
Right.
And she says she left her accent behind in
Yeah.
Virginia. And I was thinking, like, well, how did you come by that New York accent then? Um, but
She
I
stopped in New
don't
York.
care. I don't care. She's great
Yeah.
in the film.
Yeah.
I always hate it when she leaves the film. I'm like, oh no, stay.
Yeah,
Please.
she just kind of drifts off like
Perfect
they
though, right? Perfect.
for sure, for
Drifts
sure.
away.
Not that you have to settle something with her, but
I mean,
she's
how
so good, you want her back.
no, it's I mean, how perfect is this? She's still friends with her ex-husband who
Mm.
married like one of her best friends. She runs into them and
Yeah.
she goes away with her ex-husband and
Yeah.
his wife. She just drifts off with them. These
Yeah.
people are all tumbleweeds. And
She even
so
mentions at the beginning he sends roses the anniversary of their divorce every year, and she's
yeah, she said, well, Miller said that was exactly what
yeah,
his landlady, while he was
that's right.
waiting out his divorce from his first wife, said to him. But anyway, I think that later on you see Guido return with Isabel, Thelma Ritter, and then Marilyn gives him a tour of the house this time,
Yeah.
and the way that they all fix it up. And he just seems, oh, he's just delighted. Oh, look at this. Oh my God, this is great. And then there's that really bizarre moment in the film. It's maybe the strangest moment in the film when she takes him into the bedroom and there are shots of Marilyn Monroe
Oh yeah. Yeah.
on the door.
When she was
Presumably,
stripping.
right. That's what we have to
I
assume.
like how she just closes it, right? She didn't even want him to see it.
Well, some people have interpreted that. I saw a video where a woman said that was just really ugly that they had her do that, like her turning her back on her past. But Marilyn wanted to do that.
Right. Yeah.
But there was she had a real love-hate relationship with the persona that she had a big hand in creating. She mostly created it.
Yeah.
And I know in this Blonde movie, which I probably will never see, I saw the trailer for it, and they had the woman playing her saying, "I can't do another movie with Marilyn Monroe."
Right.
But Marilyn kept running back to that persona. She would never entirely leave it behind because it had worked for her.
Right. That's how she
So
became a star. But I it's interesting because I can see how that would connect to her for real, but I just looked at it as the character being ashamed of the fact that she was a stripper and lauded for it. I mean, obviously that does connect for her for real, but I'm not thinking, oh, that's her. I'm just thinking of Roslyn, which I thought made sense. Who this woman who wanted to be like a dancer, and
yes,
of course
became a stripper.
and it turned into something entirely different. But I know we touched on Guido.
I just wanted to say about Guido before we move on. I want to come back. We're going to get into
no, I wanted to stay on him, but go ahead.
I wanted to say, oh, okay. Well, I just wanted to say that in it, he wants her to be, I think he's looking at her as kind of an improvement on his late wife. So you have daughter with Gable, and you have sister wife kind of with Guido.
That's interesting. I never thought of that. Yeah.
And then with Monty Clift, with his character Person, we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
He is fucking brilliant.
So good.
In this fucking movie.
And very comedic, which I haven't seen him be funny in anything else.
He is fantastic. But but in real life, and there's a lot of Monty's life
definitely
this film too. It's really eerie. But I think but Miller knew him, and I think he tailored the role, I think, somewhat to Monty. If he didn't at the outset,
for sure, with the surgery, the same thing with the injuries in the rodeo connecting to Clift's accident. That's really interesting what you said about Guido, and I hadn't thought of that, because he even says that once he comes back and they have the housewarming, and he goes, this house was never complete, and now it's complete with you here. And I was like, now that you mentioned that, I'm like, I can see what you mean. That's really interesting.
Why it's so weird that when he comes back to the house again, he arrives in a plane with Isabel. He goes around, he's just like, oh, this is wonderful, whoa, look at the wonderful thing, oh, you've got the gift of life, Roslyn, and all this. And then it's like where the hell is the jealousy? It emerges later in the bar.
That's right.
But I mean wouldn't you walk in and be like, God damn, man, the fucking guy's living in my fucking unfinished house with the chick that I want, and look at what she's done with it. Hey, gay.
Yeah.
Go, leave.
That I know that did. Yeah, now that you mention it, that didn't quite work. It's almost as if it was, but it certainly wasn't, like, because then later when he sees how upset she was about the horses, he's like, well, I'll just stop this right now if you come with me, so it's like, I don't think he calculated that, but he obviously was jealous, but it seemed to just come and go, which I know that didn't quite work. I see what you're saying. It just
I think it's not. I think looking at the film again, I mean, what I decided was that the most misogynistic remarks in the film are all made by him.
Definitely.
And he says at the very beginning of the film when he meets her, he's something like, "Well, when I think of all the work you have to put into it, and all that, And then later he essentially sort of tries to drive a bargain with her. I'll let the horses go if you
come with me.
Come with me. And she is really appalled by that. And then
Yeah.
at that point, when he decides that he doesn't have a chance with her, it's really funny. At the end of the film, he's kind of in a way kind of worked out this kind of male bonding marriage that he's going to now enjoy with Gable. You know, he's like, and we're going to do this and
Yeah.
that together,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
because he, you know, he's just, so in a way. I think that the Roslyn character ends up sort of affecting change for all three of the men. But the change in I think Guido is that he ultimately realizes he doesn't want to be you know, married again or have a serious woman in his life, you know,
Right.
because I mean
And
he
he
turned
also
away
wants to
from it
get the
so quickly.
horses. Yeah. And he's also the one like, let's, all right, this is what we're gonna do and split everything. And you know, at this, Gable at this point has decided, no, we're not we're not gonna do that. So yeah, he's certainly the bitter one at the end. Whereas what's interesting about Clift is that he very early on doesn't want to do this, and as he says, you know, he kind of got stuck having to go. But when he sees how upset she is, he's like, well, he says, well, it doesn't make sense. There's only four of them. You know? Well, so what's the point? But I agree. I thought Clift, I mean, that conversation that he had
Yeah,
on the phone, I mean, he
it's
doesn't, you don't even hear his mother's
no,
voice.
it's amazing.
And but yet you know how he feels about everything, and the dialogue, I mean, the behavior that he brought to it, nothing in the dialogue is anything that he's saying straightforward. He's kind of like, yeah, are you proud of me? And then clearly she's changing the subject by the way he reacts. And he's someone who clearly wants his mother to be proud of him as these rodeos, he's winning these $100 rodeos.
Well, you
And
see, you hit on it right here. The thing with the mother. See,
yeah.
that's, well, he wants Rosalind to play for him, and she does. Um,
Oh, right.
you
That's
know,
interesting. Yeah.
and
Like,
the
that's right.
one
Hand on
scene,
the lap, perfectly blocked. Have the
the
head on like a
Peloton
child.
scene, as
Yeah.
I think of it, the Peloton scene. It's in the back of a bar. That's my favorite scene in the movie.
I mean, it's so beautifully acted and directed, blocked. It's such a good scene. It's the scene I always remember the most.
And it's just everything about it. It's just magnificent. But yeah, supposedly she kind of really blew it the first time they did the scene, and then Houston, you know, said we're going to do it again, and that time he was so impressed with her that he offered her uh, uh, a role in his forthcoming biography of Freud, which she turned down because
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, she turned it down because her psychiatrist was close to Anna Freud, the Freud's daughter, and Anna Freud didn't want a film made about her father.
Oh, I see.
But Clift had problems with his mother in reality. His story in the film, Persa's story in the film, is that his father was shot to death by
Yeah.
hunters,
Yeah.
and his mother remarried within 3 months of his father's death, and they lived in a ranch in, I think they say, Black Hills, Colorado, something like that. And he was I guess the heir, was the heir apparent to the
Yeah.
ranch. Um, but then his stepfather, new stepfather, treated him as an employee. He says, and you know, he turned around and offered me
Yeah.
wages,
You offered me
which is
there's the
which is the big dirty word in the movie.
I love that. Anything beats wages. I love that.
Yeah, anything beats wages. Well, it's the whole idea of being somebody else's man, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
you don't work for yourself. It's independence. It's freedom. Again, this is the whole thing in the film. It's about freedom.
Right.
So, but in reality, Clift had a very problematic relationship with his mother,
Yeah.
whose name was Sunny. And so that's in the you know, kind of
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
kind of in the movie also. And
That's
as I
such a good
say,
scene.
Miller knew Clift, so I can't help but think that, you know, maybe that all the stuff about the mother went into the
Oh, yeah. And you know, the fact that he also is getting injured so much in these rodeos, and he even mentions having he says something along the lines of some kind of work done on his face. I don't think he said surgery, but he says, yeah, no, my face is all healed up now.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
He says, yeah, my face is all healed up now.
Right. And for
Right
anyone
from
who
the
doesn't
accident.
know, exactly. And for anyone who doesn't know, Clift was in a major accident in the late 50s, which altered his appearance. But he's funny in this too. Like I was like uh, and it's not meant to be a criticism that he wasn't funny before. I just think the other parts he played were very, very serious, and he's always fantastic. But those scenes where he's falling off the off the horses, and when he's drunk in the car as they're heading to the rodeo, or even later on when he wakes up and he doesn't know how the hell the bandages got on his head. I
Yeah.
mean, I found him really humorous. It's almost as if his performances took on an extra layer after that accident. Like he was there was something more interesting about him after that accident, in the real life accident. I found in like Wild River, the other films he did. I haven't seen Freud,
I haven't either.
but yeah, even Judgment at Nuremberg. I mean, there's just
He's
something
great in
that's
that
like
too.
this tortured person that comes through, and I thought he's so incredible in this. But I'm glad you brought that up, because it hadn't dawned on me that she was, they tell she has all these problems and they have all these problems, and they're the ones, they tell her everything, and it's because they're looking for either a daughter or a mother or a sister or a wife.
The
That's
sister
so
wife.
interesting. Yeah, it's almost like it's all a surrogate family in the end, except Guido, he gets kicked out.
Well, such a family can't exist for very long. I mean,
Right.
if the family consists of a woman who's being hunted by three men, which is in
Yeah.
effect what's happening. And Barbara Leeming, again, the woman from whose book I read terribly earlier, she says that thinks that one of the great problems of the script is that Miller never fully developed the connection between the hunting of the Mustang and the hunting of Roslyn. But in a sense, she's being hunted as they are. But each of these men, and you
Oh
said
yeah,
something,
yeah.
you earlier said something um, that is very true, which is that it's something to the effect of these men don't know her. I mean, they're all projecting these fantasies onto her.
Right.
They haven't taken they meet her and they're projecting all these things.
That's true, because they don't really they don't know her at all. So it's even
That's
Guido especially. He's going on and on about her. It's like, oh, you know how to live. He's like, how does he know that she knows how to live? You know?
they all marvel at her.
Yeah.
And she's Guido says she has the gift of life, or
The gift of life. That was it.
and there's another moment in the film I really like a lot is that kind of it's like a pagan dance that she does when she's drunk at the after this kind of housewarming party. She goes outside. She seems to be in a kind of trance, and she's dancing. There's a tree in the yard. She's kind of waving around, and she ultimately ends up kind of holding on to the tree. There's just something so again, it's like a pagan dance. She's like a pagan priestess, who's drinking some potion, and
yeah.
well, which the character in the film in fact is of course drunk. But they all meet her, and they project each of them
Certainly. Yeah.
seems to have some sort of prescription for the role she's supposed to fill.
Right. The other moment that I really liked, because she's like, I like the way she contradicts herself. Like on the one hand, she says to Gable, "Oh, I don't feel about you that way," and then she's with him the next morning. Then Clift says to her, "Oh, so I guess you're with him now," and she goes, "Oh, I don't," she doesn't really know what she's doing, which I thought was interesting to see the main character like that. And then she afterwards, and back at the house when Gable's so drunk, she goes, "Oh, I thought you didn't like me anymore," and she's hugging him, and I just want you to love me, and then when he leaves, she looks at the sky and she goes, "Help." Yeah.
Mm,
So I like
yeah.
these different sides of her, of this woman, and I found that really appealing, that she was sort of this existential crisis that she's having, like with, like, she just doesn't know what the hell to do anymore, like how to live anymore. I took it.
Well, yes. Well, she's experimenting with freedom. I mean, she's just, there's
That's
that
true.
wonderful line that Thelma Ritter has in the bar when uh, Marilyn is introduced to Clark Gable in the film. She says, "We're celebrating the jail burning down, the big jail burned down,"
Right, right,
and so she's free for the first time we can
right.
assume in a while. Her husband wanted to hang on to her because he shows up, turns up at the court, and tries to talk her into
Yes, that was
adoption.
Cliff's good friend, Kevin McCarthy, I believe his name.
Supposedly, their
Yeah.
friendship ended because of the film. I mean, so many things
Oh
are.
wow. Okay, I
They
didn't know
ended
that.
because supposedly Cliff felt that Kevin McCarthy had used him to get this part in the film,
Oh, okay.
which is
Huh.
weird because it's such a tiny little nothing part.
Yeah, he's in one scene, unless
Yeah.
I don't know if it was larger and it got cut down, but yeah, he's only in the steps of the courthouse. I read, I didn't know this, that Miller wrote a play about the that was based on the making of this.
Yeah, I read that too. I
I
didn't
I
know. I
haven't
didn't
read,
know anything
I didn't
about
know
that.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I have to
I just
check it
saw that
out.
for the first time.
It's interesting that he wrote the movie that is about some of the people in the film, and then he wrote a play about the making of the film. It's almost as if these people stayed with him forever. That he's these characters, Marilyn Clift. That's quite interesting. It's interesting that he returned to it.
Well, he wrote a pretty bad movie called Everybody Wins that practically nobody saw.
Oh, I've never even heard of
Uh,
it.
Everybody wins, nobody goes. Uh, and it's with Deborah Winger and I think Nick Nolte. And it seemed to me that the Deborah Winger character was it had
Based on Marilyn.
Maryland. It seems like she had some Maryland type
I'm just looking it up.
characteristics. And um, but I mean, how could you not have gone through an experience like that of this very long thing that went on with Marilyn Monroe. I mean, Miller met her in 1951, and he wanted to have an affair with her. She was already kind of in love with him. She liked him in part because he didn't paw her. They actually went to a party and he held her big toe while she poured out her heart to him. And at one point he said something to her to the effect of something about going on the stage or being a stage actress, and the people around her like burst into laughter,
Right,
which is
right,
horrible. That that this shows their estimation of her.
right.
But he took her, he said, seriously, and of course she was very aware of his status, his having written Death of a Salesman, which was a huge success. I think he won the Pulitzer Prize for it.
Mm,
So
mm.
he was one of the great hopes of the American theater at that time. He and Tennessee Williams. I mean, they were the
Yeah.
two hottest playwrights in America. Um, and um, and so he decided not to pursue her. He was trying to uh, stay in his apparently miserable first marriage. So he went back east again, and they didn't meet again until Marilyn moved to New York to get away from Hollywood and to start her own production company. And then she kind of arranged a way to meet him again or run into him again, I think. And but they had this affair, and then he went to Reno to divorce his first wife, and he was marrying, you know, arguably the most famous woman in the world at that time.
Oh
I mean,
yeah. Yeah.
it might have been a three-way tie between Marilyn and Queen Elizabeth II, and I don't even know that Elizabeth Taylor was at that particular moment as famous as Marilyn. She later,
Yeah.
she did
Yeah.
become that famous, but I think her fame really skyrocketed a little bit later in the 50s after her husband was killed in that plane crash, and she stole
Right.
Debbie Reynolds' husband. She became, like this scandal queen,
Right. And everything
and
with
tossed,
Burden
yeah,
later,
tossed him aside. So she became
Cleopatra.
the most famous woman in the world,
Yeah.
definitely, right?
Right. Right.
But no, I mean, he was married, to probably the most desired woman in the world.
Mm, mm.
The sex goddess, as people saw her. There was it just he was at the same time was being investigated by HUAC for his communist
Right.
eyes.
Right.
She came to his defense actually in that manner.
Mm, mm.
And they had this horrible experience in England while she was making The Prince and the Showgirl. She was sort of at war with Laurence
Oh
Olivier.
yeah. Yeah.
And the marriage is kind of over almost as soon as it began, because he wrote something really awful about her in his diary, and she read it. And no
Right.
one knows exactly what was said, because we don't, I guess we don't have the diary. But she gave different versions of it, but she said in essence it came down to Miller saying in his diary, "Oh my God, I married the same woman," because
Oh wow.
he hated his first wife
Oh
apparently.
no.
And she knew that, and she was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
But she had gone to so much trouble to marry the guy. She was determined to stick it out.
Wow.
And
Yeah. I've
until
been meaning
everything
to.
came. Sorry.
I've been meaning to read his memoir actually.
Hmm.
And I know we were talking. I want to read a really good Marilyn bio. There's so many, so I'm gonna check out some of the ones you suggested. Uh, you know, but it seems like every few years one comes out, so it's hard.
No, there's a million
Yeah.
books, and I just I said the Leeming book because it's I mean, that was the one I kind of pushed, because it's not it's I don't know, it's a little less salacious somehow.
Mm,
But it's really very very much focused on her relationship with Miller and with Kazan, and I like the Mailer book quite a bit, but it that's more a book, I think, for people who really already know a lot about
I see. Yeah.
the Mailer style,
Right.
which is its own peculiar thing. And
Yeah.
but he has insights, I think, into her and into the men around her. There was a kind of war that went on between Arthur Miller and Milton Green, her business partner, and Lee Strasberg, her acting coach. They were all kind of vying for control of her.
Mm, mm.
So right there, wow, I didn't even
Yeah.
make that connection until a minute ago.
To right in the film. Oh God. Well, like I said, talking about this, I makes me want to see it again because it's so layered. It's a complicated film. It's hard. I mean, it's hard to believe that it's a Hollywood film at that time, but it's also Seven Arts and UAs who were doing some really complicated character studies. So I'm not surprised, but I'm definitely going to see it again. But despite some of the flaws that that it has, it's not. What film doesn't? Was there anything else that you wanted to mention about it?
Um, well, a couple of little things, I guess. I just wanted to say that in some ways, it's the film, I think, kind of anticipates sort of uh, the sort of back to the land movement that came, the commune movement was sort of a part of that. But there was in the later 60s, there was a move. A lot of young people were trying to get away from the city, and they had this whole idea of like living in the wilderness and growing their own food and all that. And in some way, I think the film kind of anticipated that, because these people are all kind of the people in the film are all in flight from
That's true.
their urban life.
Going out to
He's
the
from
country.
Chicago, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, she does. She moves out to the sticks, and the men are already out there.
Yeah. I like when she asks, "Well, what do you do out there?" And he's like, "Nothing. Just do what you want."
That's exactly what I mean. It's like he says, "Just live."
Yeah.
Just how do you just live?
Right.
And then he has this, very nice speech. There are a lot of nice speeches. If you can get down with speeches,
for sure,
speeches can be rough, in movies. I think because it's a visual medium, not a literary medium. Certainly as I see it.
Right. There's a lot of connections he makes between like city people and people in the country, and how like he talks about city people going down there and cowboys laughing at them because they don't know how to survive out there. I thought that element of it was interesting. It's like, the city people don't know how to live. Like living in the country is how you really live. You live free. I thought that was another really appealing part of the story. But no, it's really good. I think it's certainly her best performance. I don't think she's so real. It's like I said, she's just an open wound. I mean, it's just not a false note in her. I just think she gave a really remarkable performance. I mean, you never see her get as angry as she does in this, or as emotional as she does either. I mean, I know she hates it, but it's really, really, really good.
Well, it's an anomalous performance for her. There's no other performance in her.
There's nothing that's like it. Yeah.
Miller used to say she never played a dramatic role before, which is not true. She did, in fact, early in her career. In fact, she's very good. Yeah, I
really
think
good. Yeah, I agree.
But it's a different kind of performance. It's a raw performance. I think it's technically it leaves something to be desired. She swallows lines often. There are some scenes where I still don't know what she said. It was like blah 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 blah. And in some scenes, it was said, Russell Meddy, if I have the name of the DP right, but or as you say, up north, DOP. He complained that he couldn't, that she was so drugged because she was really hooked on drugs while she was on barbiturates, and I think she took amphetamines to get up too, and if I'm remembering correctly. But he said that her eyes wouldn't focus. He could, when he was shooting her in close up, and you notice that that there's distortion. They use distorted lens in certain shots. A filter or something.
Yeah, it was like a softer focus.
Yeah, it looks glassy almost.
Yeah,
and there are scenes where it almost appeared to me as if she's just trying to remember the lines. But despite all that, it's a really raw. There may have been a filter on the camera, but it's an unfiltered sort of performance.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great about it. But I won't say that it's necessarily her best performance because she was she's really brilliant in. For example, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
Oh yeah,
Bus Stop.
I loved her in that. Yeah, that one too.
She's pretty consistently good.
Yeah.
Even though she was given really rotten material to play at times.
Yeah.
I mean, hello, River of No Return. By the way, I wanted to tell you that at one point, Robert Mitchum had known her, when she was 16 years old. He worked in the same
Right.
factory.
Well, he originally was offered this too.
He
And
was, and
turned it
supposedly
down.
the story goes something like, I just read it the other day. It was something like, he said, if John Huston calls, tell him I'm dead. It was something like that. No, he did not want to play that part.
Right.
For whatever reason, I don't know why. Maybe it's just he just didn't like the script.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard
The
to
other
say.
the final thing I would just like to just say about the film is it just. I'm sorry, this is such a rambling discussion, but that's just the way my brain works. And I haven't sleep on
That's
top
okay.
of that. I wanted to just talk about the ending just really quickly because Barbara Leeming complains about the ending in her book, and I, according to her, Houston did not want a happy ending for the film. But Miller tacked one on. I guess that was his hope for maybe the marriage. Still, even though the marriage is, I mean, they were living separately. But Miller said in I think in maybe it's in the documentary that you and I both watched, The Making of the Misfits, but he said although Roslyn and Gay seem to have reconciled, they're talking about having a child together. He said, it could have changed a second later because these people were all tumbleweeds. And I agree with him because, she gets into the truck at the end.
It's not as happy as it seems.
No, she says, I'll leave tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah. And
then she goes and she is reunited with the dog who has a human name, Tom Dooley. And she plays with the dog. And of course, he once again is seeing, the pagan girl full of life, playing with an animal. They get into the truck and he says, I bless you, girl.
Yes.
And so suddenly she starts talking about the possibility of having a child with him. And then they talk about how to get home. And she says, how do we get home? Well, that's a good question because they're out they're in the middle of
nowhere,
middle of the fucking night. And he says, that star will guide us. The highway runs right under that star. It's like, what, are you one of the magi? I mean, you're not going to be able to find the highway using a star as your guide, right? But it's beautiful, and the two times stars come up prior in the script.
Oh yeah, Wallach.
Monty Clift talks about seeing stars.
Yeah,
when he's thrown from the bull, and he talks about seeing stars. So there's an illusion there. Of course he didn't really see stars. He just lost consciousness, right? So it's an illusion there. And then later, Guido, while they're all camped out on this dry lake bed, he says something about the stars. He says, the light from that star, by the time it gets down here to Earth, the star may be dead. The star may be gone.
Right.
So, once again, in a sense, he's saying that what you're seeing up there isn't really may not really be there. I mean, isn't that sort of so?
Yeah, I thought there was some kind of a connection there.
Yeah.
With what Guido said and what Gable was saying. I couldn't quite put it together, but yeah.
I think it's a gorgeous ending, and what I like about it is that when Gable says that, there's a shot of the night sky, and it just the film, boom, that's it. It just cuts off. There's no the end written. There's no final credits. There's something really haunting about it to me. And those two people were dead within a couple of years, both of them.
Yeah.
Gable was essentially killed by the Misfits.
Yeah, right after, like within like 2 weeks.
Well, in a sense, so she has affected a change in these three men, because Gable seems to want to commit to her at the end of the film. Guido has decided he never wants to be married again. I think we can guess. He was always apparently ambivalent about it. It's almost as if he killed his wife before she could strap him down with the child. You hear Monty Clift say, per se, that he's not sure he wants to continue in the rodeo.
Right.
He
That's
might be done
right.
with that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because she had
Yeah.
earlier talked about how cool the rodeo is.
Right. Yeah.
Marilyn talked
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Another those were great moments, how upset she was getting and all that. Yeah, no, it's really, again, I want to go just watch it again because I think it's full of discoveries. Where do you want to plug Death Valley
Oh
Superstars?
yes,
Because
well, sure. Let's plug it. I did write an essay about Marilyn in it.
yeah, just for the Maryland
And
fans out there, there's a
I,
great
maybe I said a little something that hasn't been said 500,000 times before. I don't know. Yeah, I wrote that for the 50th anniversary of her death at the suggestion of a friend of mine. I really wrote it as a kind of challenge to see if I could find a way to write about her with some originality, because
Mm.
she's probably the most written about film star in history.
Highly recommend checking out Duke's book, and of course you're on Twitter as at Subversia.
I am.
And
Who
are you
knows for how
active?
much longer?
Yeah, off
Elon
and on.
Musk.
And are you
Uh,
you're active on Instagram as well, right? But are you off and
I
on with that as
am.
well?
I come and go
Okay.
on all these things. But yeah, you can find me. You can find me somehow, somewhere online, if you want to
Great.
find me.
And your website as well. So I'll leave the links
Yeah.
in the description box below where you can get in touch with Duke and follow him on social media and check out his books. Duke, thanks again. Always a
Thanks,
pleasure.
Robert.
This was another great chat. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching and or listening. If you are currently listening to this on the audio version of my YouTube channel and you've run out of episodes to listen to, head over to the YouTube channel where every single episode that I have ever recorded can be found. Go to youtube.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. I also want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in supporting my work over on Patreon, head over to the link patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. And lastly, if this is your first time here on my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.